we were taking out a new aircraft that had never been used before. It was a Navy version, improved version of the Army B-24. And they called it the B-24 in the Navy was a PB-4Y1, which was a heavy patrol bomber. And then ours was a PB-4Y2, which is a new version of the B-24. So that was the first squadron of those aircraft that were moving out.
And by the time you got in and got a plane, America had begun to manufacture and supply more airplanes than they had in the beginning, right?
Well, their effort had been more to Europe, the B-17s and all the armor and even ships, because the Atlantic was full of German submarines and right up to the very end. So the effort had been there, but they were beginning to supply the South Pacific as we were taking out a new airplane.
Okay. Now, you're serving in the Pacific, in Harry's?
In Africa or Europe.
On the other side. So, and like I said before, we've got enemies on both sides. America was under siege from two different directions. And so, did you fly your bombing missions from Hawaii, or did you move on?
Well, we started there. That was our starting point. Was from there you then go to different directions in the Pacific, depending on the mission that your squadron had. We went on submarine patrol from Hawaii for a short period of time, but then we moved on more toward.
Are you always a land? Do you
always land?
Always land. You did not. You were not on any ship. Your planes did not.
Not deliberately.
See, I know that the Navy had a lot of airplanes on a lot of ships out there. But your bombing raids are mainly
land-based bombs.
Land-based. Okay. What were your targets? Do you remember?
The primary target in starting out, it was submarines. But we were bombing one of our own submarines, but you had no way of telling what a submarine was. You could see it beneath the surface, slightly beneath, but you couldn't tell whether it was U.S. or Japan. So, and as the same token, the American ships shot at American planes. They couldn't tell the difference between. So we avoided our own Navy ships. But anyway, they told us to quit bombing submarines, and then we moved on to Tokyo, to Japan.
Okay. Go back to that just a little bit. So we lost some men by friendly fire. What they call friendly fire?
You really would never know there. That was one of our big problems, that our planes went one at a time. We went singing. So if a plane would go out, it didn't come back. You didn't know what happened to it. It just didn't come back. Sometimes after the war was over, then the Japanese were able to account for some of the planes. We had some in our squadron that were prisoners that we didn't know about it until the war was well over. And that, but as it happened, we didn't know what happened until we just got up and didn't come back.
So what I was trying to get at, though, is there's a lot made today over friendly fire. And opinion over the fact that sometimes we lose people in our services to other, to our own men, because they mistake whoever it is for, but this is not a new problem.
Not a new problem. With us, it wasn't much because we stayed away from it.
Okay.
You know, we were told to, you go through training to recognition training, that if you're on board ship, they shoot pictures of both U.S. aircraft and enemy aircraft, and you supposedly learn to tell the difference. The same as we did with recognition of enemy aircraft and submarines, but say you can't tell what it looks like when it's a little underwater. And when you see an airplane coming toward you, you're not going to stick a flag out and say, are you friend or foe? You start shooting, and then they start shooting. So you just stay away from, we were told, stay away from.
All right, did your radios help? I mean, if you saw a plane coming, if you made radio contact?
We were radio silent because the Japanese, I guess they don't, in Germany and there might have been so many radios you didn't know who was calling who, but when we were by ourselves, they could track us down by zeroing in on the radio transmission. So we had radio silence, they call it. So the only time we radioed was either when you were going down or to give a position report. You get back to your base, you would just send out strictly a position report, which by the time the Japanese had intersected or do anything about it, well, you wouldn't be there anyway.
Be too late. Now you said you're going out on missions, but it's just your airplane.
Just one airplane.
Okay, now tell me, you never did have fighters alongside of you?
Not ours.
Okay, so you're...
Well, the only fighters I saw were when they were bombing Iwo Jima. We were in the neighborhood. But it was, we went singly, no fighters ever accompanied us.
Okay, so you're going out singly on your bombing mission, and you say that your target basically is you're trying to hit Japan.
Well, that's in the beginning. When we started from Hawaii, Kaneohe Bay actually was the Navy base that we were operating from, was more training than submarine patrol. In Hawaii, our first experience with getting a little bit shook up was we ran head on into an airplane that we called a duck. It was a Grumman amphib, a single engine amphib that are launched off of battleships.
Okay.
And then the battleship picks them up when they put it to flight, and whatever happened, I don't know, but we ran head into that, so it's either pilot error or air traffic control error. So this, when you're young, nothing's going to happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
To drift back, in training in San Diego, was in what was called the after station in an old B-24. And had Bombay gasoline tanks and the hose going to the tank about that big around, and then one came loose. And I was standing back and it had open hatches, smoking a cigarette. Gasoline just, put cigarettes out, and just head to soaking wet, gasoline up to about our knees, and the sailor was next to me, he said, "Do you smell anything?" Not afraid at all, obviously. It was, and I said, "I think we've got a gasoline leak." And we called the pilot, and said, then, because they about panicked, but opened the Bombay doors and got it out. But the point is they're not afraid, you know, at this point.
Okay.
Well,
Now, you
we
said you
ran
were
into-
smoking a cigarette?
Smoking it, and then
The gasoline put it out?
put it out, and it's splashed over. No fear, no, that's not gonna happen to me. But
Okay,
then when we ran into that airplane,
okay.
we landed safely, they didn't know it, just tore their plane all to pieces.
Now, is it an enemy plane you're
No, it's
running?
our own,
It's your own?
friendly fire.
Okay, so you're running into this plane and your plane is damaged and they go down?
We lost an engine, but they tore them all to pieces, you know, and so there were two on there that killed them.
Tell me about the bomb, how you got straddled
Hadn't gotten there yet. So we start then in earnest to go to war, so after that. But the point is that you start out young and unafraid of anything, it's not gonna happen to me.
Right.
Then maybe it might happen to me. You start looking back on those things that what could have been. Now we're running this, so we go then from Hawaii to Guam to Kwajalein to Johnson Island to Tinian.
Okay, you're getting closer and closer.
Right, closer and closer. Now we're on Tinian Island, and we're now starting into the war.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We go from Tinian to Japan before the B-17s and the B-29s. B-29s were just becoming in. And along the shore, they had what they call picket boats.
Okay.
They were just big barges that were loaded with anti-aircraft. No engines on them, they were towed out, anchored, and their purpose was to shoot down the incoming B-17s and B-29s. And the radar stations that were on the coast. And our job, we'd come in below the radar, so they didn't, one airplane, and we'd try to knock the picket boats out and the radar stations, and then, so when the heavy bombers came in, that they could get in without so much notice that they would be given without us. And as Harry said, the ACAC, so plentiful, you know, to black spots all around the place. Fortunately, we never got hit in that spot. We were able to get in, do our thing, and get out. We didn't have enough gas to get back to Tinian run, so we'd stop at Iwo Jima.
Okay.
And Iwo Jima was not secured. Japanese had one end of the runway and we had the other end. So we'd land on the Japanese side and taxi up to our end, and then we'd take off from our end. So but that's when I saw fighters and fighter bombers that were bombing the Japanese positions. It was kind of like watching a movie. We'd circle around until it was clear to land, and we could see the Marines down fighting one another, and we were watching it as we would a movie. It was, the island was blown to pieces of this dust, and
Yeah,
Marine came up, he's all covered with mud, and said, did we have any bread or any water? And I said, yeah, you can have all we got. We were gassing up and going to go back to Tinian. I said, if we don't get back to Tinian, we wouldn't need the bread and water anyway, you know, but, so we could have what we had. And he said, I wouldn't have your job for anything. You're just pulling up a reed out there dirty and fighting, and I was thinking, yeah, I'd sure like to have your job. And one night that we couldn't get out for some reason. I think the runway had been blown up and hadn't been repaired enough for us to get out, so we had to spend the night on Iwo Jima. And I had little tents. I think there were two of us to a tent, screaming, banzai, banzai, and some sergeant stuck his head in and said, don't get out of the tent. They were shooting and banging. You know, we had a little pistol that I wouldn't know which end to aim, but, and again, you get a little bit of fear. that adds to the one that you already have. And there's one, I guess, before we got that far on the patrol that we had a engine catch fire. And we went down at sea then.
Okay.
So we were there 36 hours
In the water?
Splashing to one of our own planes saw us. And I taught Sunday school, and I had some pictures that were, you might have a piece of one. Yes, that's it. Yeah. This is not the one that I had, but it was white caps, and in there was a raft. And I held this picture up, it was blowing a picture, and I passed it around the Sunday school, and we were talking about miracles. You know, did anybody ever go through a miracle? And they were looking at the picture and saying, "What's this?" You know, so look real close at the picture, and they looked at all. We don't see anything particular except some ocean. So there's a raft out in that ocean, and you couldn't tell it from a white cap. And the fact that we were discovered, and that today had to be a miracle. You know, it's a big ocean, and while we had sent out a position report before we went down, that where we were, you drift, and planes went by, but we saw that didn't see us.
Can we show that, Mary? I don't know whether it's going to show up or not.
We have it, that's to the raft.
So, out there in all that ocean, you spent 36 hours in that water.
Right.
Was it cold?
It was cold.
One man right.
I think the problem with being cold was it get wet, and then the wind blows, and so the wind doesn't blow and it's wet.
How many of you were there?
One, 50 on board, and 8 survived, and 7 didn't make it.
Died.
And
Okay, how big was your life raft?
it was a one-man raft.
And there's 8 of you?
Well, we were hanging around on the sides.
So you're telling me that you hung on the side of that life raft for 36 hours?
Right. Yeah, well, not all the time, but there was a Bombay tank that was floating. And the Bombay tanks were big. And I think about 5 or 6 of us crawled up on top of that tank enough to wind blowing and got dry, and it was warm, and you know, we have to go to the bathroom and just let it go because it was warm. And then it started sinking. The tank finally sunk. It wasn't, I don't know how long it was up there. I don't know, it was crawling up on it in the middle of the night. But the rest of the time it was hanging around in the water. I was in, when the pilot said that he couldn't put the flames out of the engine. They tried to have fire extinguishers in the engine that either didn't work or didn't work enough, and then they'd dive, try and force the flames out. When it just acted like a big blowtorch and kept burning until the wing just about came off. We went in, wing cartwheeled in, and before we went down, I went up what we call the flight deck, where the navigator and the pilot and co-pilot were, and if they had a life vest, and if there wasn't any up there, we had some passengers that were up in the nose of the bombardier's compartment, which was not the place to be. And the pilot told me to go tell them to get in the catwalk. Well, they had their life vest in his spare, so I went back and took my position. I put that raft behind me for a cushion. We were going to land, and about before we hit, a friend that was up on the flight deck that I asked for the life vest, he came in and had one. He said, I found a life vest. And he handed it to me, and we must have hit about that time. It broke his arm, and we had a threaded pipe that lowered a radar, and his leg was just threaded. Broke all the bones in his face, and he was still having medical care even now after that. But I got the raft out then, and then called a plane captain named Dandy, and I heard this lad call him Red, which is what I was known up then, and went over and got him out. The Dandy said there was wing floating, and the pilot was on that wing, and he said, I'm going to go over and see if I can get something to help us, another raft or anything to help us float. And I told him to stay with the raft, that we'd pick up that we'd go get the pilot, and he said, oh, maybe I can help. So he left. The pilot jumped off the wing and swam to the raft, and he swam to the wing, and then I was last that saw him. We could see him sitting on the wing. He was too tired to swim back. So he had a little whistle that was in the raft, and I could hear him blowing that whistle, long after I couldn't see him, and in the darkness I could hear that whistle blowing, but that was the last we ever saw of him. But we got...
So when they picked you up, they didn't find him?
No. Well, that would have been the next day before they came around to us finding us. Then they had to get once they located us, they had to get a ship to pick us up. And so there was a weather ship that was somewhere, I guess, in the neighborhood that picked us up. And then we were transferred to a destroyer because the weather ship was so slow that the destroyer, I don't remember any of that. I remember getting on the first ship and getting off on.
Okay, now go back to where you're out there at the sea, in the sea. You're wet and cold. You're praying that somebody will see you. Does your life flash before your eyes? I've always wondered.
Well, again, as Harry said, that for some reason, I was calm and wasn't afraid I'm afraid afterwards. Or afraid of the future or afraid of the past, but not at the moment. So many occasions that happen that you could be afraid. As a radio operator, you're also a radar operator, as well as being a gunner. And we had gone to Singapore. We moved from Tinian to Iwo Jima to the Philippines. And then we'd fly along the Borneo coast to Singapore. And then back, and it was about an 18-hour flight. And you never know in betweens to stop and get gasoline. If you ran out, if you ran into some unexpected bad weather, or if you were attacked, you use evasive actions that use up gasoline that you didn't plan on. You don't plan on getting attacked. And we were lost. And the pilot laid it on me. He said, well, on the radar, if you find any land, let me know. And our gas tanks were showing empty, and I picked up something that I said, I don't know if it's a cloud that's 100 miles away, I don't know if it's a cloud or it's an island. Happened to be the end of our island. And again, the point is that we could go in the water any minute, but you're not afraid. You've got a job to do, and you're doing it. And fear is not even a thought.
Okay,
we ran out of gas when we landed. We didn't even taxi off the runway. we ran out of gas, so.
And did you find out where you were?
Well, we were at our base.
Okay.
We were heading for a base, but the navigator didn't know it. He was lost, so he wasn't sure where we were. So we were gonna land on any land that we could find, whether it be enemy or.
All right, now Ray, let's go back just a minute to your plane going down. I'm interested to know, you said your buddy was hurt real bad. You got a one-man raft. How do you keep him? Now, he can't swim. He's got a life vest on.
I don't know how we got him in the.
Did you get him into the
I don't
raft?
remember. I know we got him, and I went over there, the dandy had left, so I was by myself in the raft. And since he was calling for me, I went to him. I had to have had help in getting him into that raft. You know, there's no way that I could have, it's hard to get in the thing anyway, you know, when you're able-bodied, you know, the raft sets up about like that out of water, so pull yourself up, and I don't know how we got him in there. I know that his mouth was coagulated with blood. There's just a hole where he could breathe through. His nose was all smashed up. In fact, it was sitting over on the side of his face. And he could somehow communicate because he said he was thirsty. One of the crewmen had tasted the water that had a little can, like a Coke can of water. And he said it doesn't taste good, and threw it overboard. It had probably been in there 10 years, but it rusted more. So he said he was thirsty. And I said, well, we'll get you some water. And he said, I could see Dandy over there on the rock drinking water. Dandy was the one that had moved over to the wing and then was lost. And he said, we can pull over there and get water. So, well, there's another rock up ahead that's got some water. Then after that, well, he couldn't talk at all. It was all.
So he was delirious.
Well, his mouth was just completely closed up except for just a hole big enough to breathe through.
Okay. Now, I understand that you received a medal for this, for your time.
But they didn't give any, we said we only got the medal for answering roll call 3 times straight. It was more for missions and the area where you come under enemy attack. So, like Harry got the Distinguished Flying Cross and some oak leaf clusters in lieu of another medal, and the air medal is, I think the Flying Cross is a pretty distinguished medal.
So that's what you got.
The air medal is pretty well done. You know, you give a lot of medals. The Freedom Medal, which that got underneath there, or campaign, and Harry was talking about information that they usually had on the back of our jackets, which are in several different languages, saying if you'll get this airman to the.
Okay. Now here is the picture of you in your little boat. And then this
The frame
is
of this thought that would be a good idea.
And that's a beautiful frame.
These are campaign medals that don't mean anything individually as far as heroism or activities. It's just that you were in that campaign, like a campaign of the China Sea or the Zulu Sea or the Philippine Liberation, something like that. So
yeah, my husband got a Korea medal for being in the campaign of Korea, and he barely got it. He was just, you know, he was in the very last bit of it. He didn't really do that much for Korea, but.
Well, one thing took me a long time to get was a good conduct medal. And that had Bobby's name on it. He stole mine. I didn't get one from my old, but I had Bobby's, I think he took it back.
Those are interesting. All right, now, so here we are, you're bombing Japan, and did you go home, did they pull you back after you came, you lost your plane? Did they pull you back and pull you out of active service?
Well, they gave it an opportunity that you could go back home on 30 days survivor's leave, is what they call it. And then you'd turn around and come back. And I thought, well, I'm out here, I'd rather go ahead and get it over with and not have to come back again. So I stayed and the pilot stayed, and we were the only, there were 3 pilots and 2, a pilot, co-pilot, and a navigator, and the pilot and navigator would switch places every once in a while. And the 4 of us were the only ones remaining of the original crew. And all of us elected to go ahead and finish the tour rather than go home and come back.
All right, so did you get on another plane?
Got well, then we were picking up the new planes.
So you're going to be assigned a brand new plane?
So we're brand new planes. Well, we didn't actually have one. There were 18 crews and 15 airplanes. So you had a spare crew, the plane, so we took whatever plane was ready to go when our time came to make a tour. We took whatever was available, so we flew different ships that were in there. And then before the bomb was dropped, then they started relieving crews. We had the most trouble, so we were the first crew to be relieved to go back. So I know I spent my birthday in Hawaii, and was a hotel in Hawaii, the famous Royal Hawaii.
All right, can you think of anything else during your active duty time that you want to bring in?
No, that's out of an occasional attack. We didn't have the kind of attacks that went through, like Harry went through and in the Europe, but then they didn't have the long hours over the water
that you all did.
We rendezvoused on Thanksgiving Day. We rendezvoused with an American submarine. If we spotted any shipping, we'd relay the information to the submarines. And if anything that they could pass to us, that would be helpful to the effort when they do this. And our pilot was complaining that it was Thanksgiving Day, and we were out there, had been out at that point about 12 hours, and we were eating nothing but K rations. And the guy said, well, we can kind of sympathize with you that we're having turkey and dressing and something else, but he said, we've been out here 6 months. And so it sort of balances out all the time. And
right.
Like the Marine, that wasn't on our job. And I couldn't think of anything worse than a foot soldier, that fighting an enemy that you can't see in the dirt.
At least you were dry most of the time.
Had a good place to sleep. If we had a place to sleep, if we didn't, well, it didn't make any difference.
Okay. Now, what did you think about the bombing of Pearl Harbor? I mean, not the bombing of Pearl Harbor, I'm sorry, dropping of the atomic bomb. I got all confused.
Delighted, I guess, as probably most people, that we were at that point winning the war as far as pushing the Japanese back to the home. But with kamikaze and things like that that were taking a bunch of lives, and the lives that would be taken if we had to invade Japan. The same resistance that I'm sure they would get if they invaded the U.S., that every man, woman, and child would be defending this country. So not only would be millions of those people get killed, but bunches of us would be killed. So all that was, and at that time we didn't know the extent of the damage that the bombing that happened. But we were glad that it was.
Where were you when you heard that war
Was
was
on in the Philippines on Palawan Island. It's a little island that's separate from the mainland of Philippine Islands. It was a small island that had just pretty much our base and the runway.
How'd you celebrate?
I don't know that there's not much chance of celebrating. I think they give you a beer if you're a beer drinker, a lucky one, but the food is, was what you could keep in a tropical area, so that wasn't much. It was a little K-ration that was cardboard boxes covered with wax that you got in, and had a little, we called it tropical butter, but it was, I guess, kind of a processed cheese. And we had sea rations when we were on a bigger base, but I don't think there was much to celebrate with. We did shoot our guns out into our hut was right on the beach, so.
I've heard there's a difference between C rations and K rations.
C rations are cooked, and generally where you have a cook, and it's sort of like something spaghetti without the spaghetti. The meat sauce, it's kind of a meat mixture. I thought it pretty good, but I guess it was because it didn't have much else. The eggs were, dry, mixed with water. Milk was powdered, mixed with water, which gets to be okay. But we didn't even have that on the plane. We just had
Did you
water.
get much mail while you were over there? Did you know where your brothers were?
No. Did get, Mama had received on our plane went down, Mama had received a missing in action. And then I had a chance to write her, and she wrote back and said, "Tell your pilot not to do that no more."
Your mother must have been a special person.
She was. She was the head of the household.
Okay.
But I guess my wife says that she had a bunch of good boys, and it wasn't because of Papa, it was because of Mama, I guess.
So when you're coming back to, the war is over, and you're coming back, do you think, are you glad to give it back to America?
Glad to get back. The war's not over. I'm one day out of San Francisco. I come back on board ship. I flew different aircraft from the Philippines to one little island or next, and then I'd wait until another plane would come to take me a little further. And then when Hawaii, I got aboard a ship going into San Francisco, and we were a day out of San Francisco when the war was over. So, trying to go back when you said, did you celebrate the war? I don't remember celebrating anything, but since the war wasn't over, though, we didn't really have anything to celebrate at that point. And then when we went into San Francisco, there was so much problems, I guess, with riots, and that they wouldn't even let us off of the base. We got from the ship, we got on a bus that took us to the base, and from the base, we got on a bus that took us to the railroad station, that took us wherever we were going. Never let us get into downtown at all. There were guards on us that wouldn't let us out and celebrate.
Do you think that there was a difference in the America and their attitude toward the war than there is today?
Oh, large difference in both what I perceive myself and what I read in letters of the editor and things of that nature, that at that point we truly had something to fight for. And there's some big division as to what we're fighting for, both in Vietnam, and what's going on in Iraq, as to just what is the mission and what's it for.
Okay, we had a clear-cut mission.
At least in my mind and the people that I knew and the propaganda that was put out. Sure, the German, well, Hitler was bad, but by and large, we think the German people and the Italian people and the Japanese people are not all that bad. That are the propaganda was put out at the time, but the pictures, movies of the Japanese with teeth, hanging out, and they're 8 feet tall, and we had a prison on Tinian with Japanese, they were about 3 feet tall and all wrinkled.
Quite different than what you've been led to do.
And I turned pretty sympathetic toward the people, but they were defending what they thought to be their country. The propaganda that they got, I'm sure, was the same that we got against them.
Okay.
And I don't see that in today's.
If you had any advice to give to young people today, what would it be?
Well, I live in Memphis, so, don't go out of the house. An education.
Okay. Did you get an education when you came back on the GI Bill?
Got a GI Bill education. I got the pilot's license that gave me a part of a job after I got out working, and it just makes life so much easier. Harry's tutored a young lad that couldn't read, and then trying to go through life not being able to read. What else can you do if you can't read? You can dig ditches and do exactly as what somebody tells you to do. You can't do much on your own if you can't read.
So your advice would be to get an education. Okay. All right, it's been a joy talking to you.
Glad to be able to tell some of the experiences that
Okay.
brothers don't want to listen to.
You want these pictures?
All right.
You copied them, didn't you?
Yeah, those are just paper copies. Well, I
Most life on that.
didn't think about it.
But he didn't think about that, but I did. I was trying to keep trying to.
I did. Well, you did later. You didn't say it very loud.
It's hard to remember everything when you're doing this.
And he's also very modest.